Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. To do another fantasy nerd chat today. I am Andrew, aka Shivers Mindgasms, for the purposes of this chat, and we've got friendly centrist, aka woke centrist, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, of course, and our resident fantasy nerd friend, Mask AKA Tristram Johnson, and we're going to talk about Best Served Cold today, which is, I would say, it's actually probably even my favorite grimdark fantasy book, and probably my favorite Joe Abercrombie book too. I actually like it even more than First Law. So we're talking about Best Served Cold, which of course is by Joe Abercrombie, aka Lord Grimdark, and it's about his fantasy murder, sex, betrayal, lots of kinky sex, plot twists, extremely brutal violence, and it's my favorite revenge story ever, and it's the first standalone novel in the First Law universe that takes place after the original trilogy, and it's about the character Monza Murcatto, who is basically the head of assassins or mercenaries for the Grand Duke Orso, who's controlling Styria at this point. And she gets betrayed, and her brother gets killed. They attempt to murder her. They leave her for dead. She gets healed, and then she basically gets her band of merry poisoners and mass murderers together to get revenge on the 7 men responsible for her death and people who are basically controlling the empire. And yeah, there are lots of really interesting things that happen, and we have characters from the original First Law trilogy, like Shivers and Casca, and Shivers is my favorite character in this for sure. And he goes kind of like, he basically takes the place of Logan Nine Fingers at one point. He's trying to be a good guy at first, and then he eventually decides, no, I'm going to accept my evilness and basically go into berserker mode. So yeah, so I know you hadn't read this before, Tristram. So
No.
what did you think about it? I know you said you liked it, but what did you think about it in general overall?
It was my first time reading the book, and I thought it was excellently plotted. Like, there's only so many different plots in the world, but one of the things that Joe Abercrombie does is that he knows the tropes, so he deliberately chooses to invert them. And even though you know that he's intending to do that, he still manages to surprise you. And I think that
Yeah.
shows that he's an excellent writer. But his surprises don't seem cheap. They don't seem like just like he couldn't think of a way to get out of this situation, so he just made some it up. They all seem planned, they seem well foreshadowed. And I think one of the things I would say that, in my opinion, Joe Abercrombie is possibly the best at, maybe of any writer I know, is characterization. Like, I'm a big fan of people like Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan, and George R.R. Martin, and they're all good with characters. But the characterization that Joe Abercrombie seems to manage to pull is just incredibly, incredibly good. And you really feel that these people are three-dimensional, real people in the way he gets into their heads, and that no one is completely evil, but everyone's a little bit evil. And that's very much, I think, a reflection of humanity. But Joe Abercrombie's, I mean, I think hopefully his people are a little more dark than real life, but I think he clearly shows, though, that there are depths and that there are people who will go to crazy places. But even those people are understandable. And that is cool. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. Yeah, like a great example of that is Shivers in this, of course, because as I mentioned, at first he's trying to be a better man and not be such a mass murderer who's so ruthless, and he's trying to become a better person, and eventually Monza Murcatto convinces him to keep on helping her kill people, but we see how much he struggles psychologically throughout that with basically his transition back into being a merciless, murdering bastard.
Well, I would say it's a little worse than that, because I think in the North he wasn't just a merciless, murdering bastard, as you put it. He was a warrior, and in the North the rules are, kill or be killed, and like he was totally ready to kill his enemies, but he's a named man now, and he's looking for something like a bit of honor. And at the beginning, he's talking about wanting to be like Rudd Three Trees, right? But and like he sees the Bloody Nine as kind of like a little very crazy, and like he's like, yeah, he's a man to like respect, but he's not a man to want to emulate. And so he's trying to make a better life. He's been sent down here because he's been told that the South's nicer, that it's better, that he's going to have all these opportunities, and that isn't how it works out. And Murcatto has had it all. Like, she's had a great life until the beginning of this book, when it all goes incredibly well, not perfectly, but she was in a really good spot. And yet she's really, really soured now because of what happens to her. So one of the beautiful literary things that George Abercrombie does here is he takes this guy who's simple, doesn't have much, but is proud of who he is and wants to be a good person, believes in honor and making a name for himself. And this person who's already made a name for herself, who's already been top of everything, but who is like, no, the world is crap. Everyone's crap. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone's disgusting. Everyone's evil. And then she forces him down to her level. And then he actually goes beyond her level and is actually worse than her. And he goes worse than he's ever been, because the way he is at the end of this book is far, far, far worse morally and in killing than it was ever in the original trilogy. And Murcatto actually, by the end of this book, realizes that she isn't wanting to be as killer heavy as she starts. So they actually switch. But the sad thing is that by the end of this book, it's too late. And she, yeah. And that's Greek of the book. Oh, I can see where this is going, and it's just inevitable. And, yeah.
The crazy thing now is that Shivers ends up becoming kind of her I wouldn't say moral compass, but more of the guy that kind of makes her try to stick to a more moral path. One of those things is because he was completely down the same path as her in the first book. Like, he did want to get his revenge on Logan, and then when he got the opportunity at the end of the book, he walked away completely. Like, he was like, I can't do this, and he was gone. And he was given the opportunity by Black Dow. He's like, yeah, you in this with us? And no, he left. So he knows like how torn and how this certain path can make a person morally. And it's interesting to see him as, the guide stone here, when he even talks to her multiple times on how it's unfulfilling. It's not going to help you.
Yeah.
And
murdering people and go ahead.
She is the inverse, right? She's telling him this honor and morality and trying to be a good person is not fulfilling. I've tried that. I was nice to Casca and look where it got me. I was nice to Orso, look where it got me. I was nice to my brother, look where it got me. And so they literally cross over throughout the book. They're constantly trying to persuade each other. Then they do both persuade each other, but it's too late for both of them. It's great. I couldn't write it because it much, but it's amazing to read someone who can write it and write it without pulling any punches.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Joe Abercrombie is really, he's so excellent at that. Yeah, I was just reminded when you were mentioning that of the part I was reading yesterday when, it was Rogan. Yeah, when Monza Murcatto was like they were she was kind of like palling around with Rogant, who she used to hate when she was the Snake of Talons, is it? When like when she was the head assassin for Duke Orso, basically she hated him, but
Which
basically she go ahead.
Yeah, she wasn't an assassin. Like she leads an army. There is like she killed people off for him, but she did it as a there's a difference between assassin and general, and she was definitely a general.
Yeah.
Most
she was
of the
more
time
like
she
a general of an army. Yeah.
But it's funny because most of her career she like faked battles with other mercenary groups.
Yeah.
Just until she crossed the line where Duke Orso offered her double, and then because Orso knew what was up, and then she and then Casca had all types of problems of his own, his demons battling with alcohol and everything like that.
Yeah, that's I mentioned Casca is another one of my favorite characters in this because we see how far he's fallen from his former glory as a warrior, and how much of a helpless alcoholic he is, and then he gets involved with one of those giant plot twists where he betrays Monza, but then he ends up fighting for her because he was paid to basically lie down in the battle that was supposed to be against her army. There's a really cool dynamic going on there.
There is. And I think actually that might be something that could be quite interesting, Andrew, if we just look at now, like, you talked about like one of the things they do in this book is this is like an ensemble cast. Even though it's clearly her book, she's Captain Kirk, but there's clearly an ensemble cast here. And her relationship with each of the different members of the crew is very interesting. So we've talked about her and Shivers.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about her and her old boss. And so interestingly,
just with Shivers, before we get into that more, we also didn't mention that Monza has this spontaneous sexual relationship with Shivers where they basically become fuck buddies, and she has mixed feelings about it, which confuse him a whole lot because she feels bad about it, but she basically just wants some sense of like escape through sexual release with him, and then we get the kinky sex scenes and stuff like that. And then there's some inadvertent comedy that Joe Abercrombie does where there's that part where Morveer the poisoner, he fucks up what he's doing and he ends up falling while dangling on this sheet through a window where they're having sex. and there's a really interesting dynamic with all of the characters there, as you mentioned. I was thinking of that too, because as they're going along assassinating people, one big piece of it is assembling this crew, which kind of reminds me of that kind of Ocean's 11 kind of feel that I was remembering. You also kind of get that from book 2 of Gentlemen Bastards.
Right. I was gonna say too, like, because there's so many characters, and we do see that the sex scenes get interrupted quite often. I think at least 3 times. But it's interesting that Shivers, because she wanted an unemotional attachment to Shivers because she wanted to pay him in their first encounter, kind of just signaling that she didn't want any strings attached to these sexual relationships. And basically Shivers countered with, this is not something I need paying to do, and he basically gave her money back.
You're making me feel like a whore. I don't like this.
Well, it's also
pretty much.
One of the things again is that you can see that Shivers is just from a simpler world, right? In the North, you like someone, you bang them. That's that. Whereas she's in this, like, we see like with Rogant, the whole who's marrying who for what potential potential value, because she's basically ready to. She at the end, even though she despises Rogant in many ways, she's basically gonna be his woman, and like she respects Shivers way more, but Rogant can give her power, nobility, a level of like real life, and I think that's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting contrast between them. That Shivers wants the simple things in life, and she claims throughout that all she wants is something simple. She just wants to be left alone, but she doesn't. She doesn't. She wanted the big money. That's why her brother could get in her head. She wanted it. That's why Duke Orso could get in her head. She wanted it. That's why Koska wasn't enough. When he started,
don't they imply also that Dana was more than just her brother?
Yeah. Who is it that tells her? I mean, I was curious about what you think about this, what you guys think about this too. I mean, it sounds like just kind of like gossip bullshit to me that she's told that, or no, that Shivers is told that she had a sexual relationship with her brother. But what do you guys think about that?
Well, there was that one instance where Shivers wakes up and she's like knocked out after like in a sexual encounter, and she says her brother's name.
Yeah,
right.
There's
which isn't
the other
proof, but yeah.
And then he goes. There's like a discussion between like her old Thousand Swords officers, and one of the officers says that her brother said that she sucked cock like no other. Like, how would he know?
Yeah.
Which is that'd be kind of a weird thing to say about your own sister, you know?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, how close they supposedly were.
The thing is, there's throughout, Joe Abercrombie does something here that he does in all his books, which I've ever read, which is that he hints at things and hints at things and hints at things, and then he doesn't definitively answer it, but in the end, he pretty much says, yeah, it's even worse than you thought. Because that's what he's doing here. Like, he did it with the Bloody Nine, right? He's like, oh, yeah, he's got this dangerous side to him. It will pop off. It will pop off. And then like, oh, yeah, people say it's like he's possessed. And then we see him like let out the Bloody Nine a bit and like go into a cool fighter mode. I'm like, oh, it's just like it's like a barbarian raging in a D&D campaign. But then he goes off and kills the Thunderhead and like turns his back on the whole plan and goes to be king in the north. And everyone's like, what the? Oh, you really are like a complete psycho. Like,
yeah.
And I think he does that here with her. Like, we think, all the things that have been said about her lies, but she constantly is like, whatever. But then he does seem to suggest by the end of it that they were in a somewhat abusive relationship. That her, and that's the other thing, like her brother at the beginning seems like this super nice, like, oh, they've got this super cool relationship. Like, she protects him and he's this like weakling that she looks after, but he's a bit of a dandy and a fanboy. Maybe he's a bit gay or whatever because of the way they portray him. Like, they portray him like as a dandy. And so it gives all those vibes. But then as it starts peeling back the layers, you find out, no, he was the one who told her to betray Koska. He was the one who always wanted to go further. He was the one who was prepared to do the dirty on Orso. He's the one who constantly pushed. And then you start realizing that it hints that he's basically being the bastard in their relationship. And like that he was getting her expensive jewelry and that she was supposed to wear it. And like, again, suggests a little bit like a mistress, not just a sister. And definitely the suggestion from the book is that she absolutely did have a sexual relationship with him and that it was to his benefit more than hers.
Okay, so you guys, do you guys agree that it seems like it's likely that they actually did have a sexual relationship then? Okay.
And I think that's Abercrombie doing his, you thought I wouldn't go there, didn't you? I'm Lord GrimDark. I go everywhere. And like, no, they can't be having an incestuous relationship. He wouldn't do that. He's like, oh, I totally just did. And because that's totally Joe Abercrombie, right? To say these things have gone on, so I'm not going to pull my punches. There is no taboo here, and just throws it out there. And
that's
like,
a good point. Yeah, very well said. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's not proved. Like, I believe it's possible to interpret it a different way, Andrew. Like, but I'm just saying I think the overtones are heavy enough that to me, it felt pretty much like he was saying, this is what's happening.
Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, you guys. I think you guys convinced me that I didn't notice as many clues as you guys did before. So yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, but the Joe Abercrombie is an expert. Is as you said, saying, "Oh, you think I'm going to go there? No, I'm going farther than you expected. Way farther."
Yeah. And it's super wrong, right? And that's exactly why he does it, because he's like, people are like, well, you just can't. And he's like, well, what if someone did? And that's constantly what he's saying with all of his characters. Like a character who's saving the day, well, you can't have him kick the dog. Well, I just had him chop the dog's face off. You're like,
yeah.
But the thing is, he literally has these characters be both sides. And he says to you, he doesn't tell you what to think. He doesn't tell you should say that Murcatto is bad or good. He just says, this is what she's done. And then you as the reader can kind of decide for yourself. And I think that's fantastic. I wouldn't recommend these books to most of my acquaintance because I think they're freaking harsh. But
you have to really like Grimdark to like these books.
His character work is magnificent. And because he is so dark, a little bit like George Martin, he's hard to predict. And that makes his books exciting. It makes them. He could have genuinely killed her, and I'd have believed it.
One thing that I like about Joe Abercrombie, slightly more than George R.R. Martin, though, even though I am a huge fan of Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones, is that Joe Abercrombie gets grimdark, but he doesn't get so fucking disturbing that it bothers me like it sometimes does with George R.R. Martin, where there'll be people getting tortured and having their limbs cut off, or there'll be people being repeatedly raped and beaten, and children getting burned alive and shit like that. There's terrifying shit that happens in Joe Abercrombie's books for sure, and there are good people who do fucking unbelievably evil things, but it seems like maybe I don't know how much of it is the way that he does it, and how much of it is that he doesn't go as far as George R.R. Martin goes. I don't know which one of it is more the case that makes me feel that way about Joe Abercrombie's books.
Well, I think Joe, and able to counter kind of like that tone, his narrative voice has a bit of humor in it.
Yeah.
Unlike George R.R. Martin, who doesn't. Like, he'll have some characters that crack jokes like Tyrion.
Yeah.
But the overall, like, narrative...
Yeah,
he doesn't have that. Well, as, we're talking about Joe Abercrombie, he describes a battle scene, and then some guy gets stabbed in the throat, and he describes it as like a weak farting sound.
There's some really dark comedy in there, a lot for sure. That's what Joe Abercrombie is known for. He's really an expert at that, having these super fucking terrifying situations and people cracking really dark jokes that make you laugh.
Yeah, because one of my favorite jokes that he ever wrote was from Red Country, when it's just like describing a frontier town, and like some random lady was throwing crap from like a second story window, and he described like her breasts as a pair of rotten hams. And I was just like cracking up for a while. And he was just trying to describe like how cringy and nasty this town was, and that's why he decided to do it.
He's really great at creating that grimdark atmosphere.
Yeah.
Just in every way he describes things that are going on in the settings.
Yeah, and like you said, like before, like with Glockta, right? Who is like this evil, like torturer guy who chops people's fingers off with like a cleaver, and yet he makes Glockta quite sarcastic.
Yeah.
And like he's looking at the world through this really cynical sort of like, you could almost see him if he was in our day being one of those cynical comedians who like does like nasty commentary on the entire world. It's like, oh, everyone's like rubbish, aren't they? Kind of thing. But anyway, you can't do that with someone who gets a cleaver and chops off people's fingers. But he said, but I just did. And you're like, oh, okay. And you're super rich, so you can keep producing these books because people obviously love it. Oh, we just lost them. But
hopefully
I think the dynamics of the group are really interesting. So Koska, his story is so cool. Like the fact that he's like this mentor to her, but he's also like exactly the kind of person who screwed her family over in the first place. Like the reason that she's homeless is mercenaries like him. But instead of like fighting that, she's just become the best of the people who used to mess up her life, and now she's messing up other people's lives. And that's a beautiful parallel of this entire book. And so in a way, she's looking for revenge, and the very person who needs revenge on her is Koska. Yeah, because she betrayed him, just like she then got betrayed. And it's a beautiful, like intricate double parallel where she's like going from good to bad with Shivers. With Koska, it's like, I betrayed you, now you betrayed me. I betrayed you, now you betray me. And both of them heading towards Orso, who has betrayed them both. And so it's just really interesting to see that parallel there. And he has that sort of father-daughter thing going on with her, which is really cool. Because it's been, because it's what you call it, like it's wrong. It's not in a good way, is it? And and yet he's like, she does feel this for Koska. She does, even though he's a complete drunk and messed up. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's so interesting that there's betrayal all over the place, and you like we get into that. Oh, there's Dusty's back here. There's what we at first think is Shiver's betrayal of Monza, but it's basically just to lure. Oh, Dusty got kicked out again. To lure Koska's people into a trap, and then it turns out that he's just basically lying down in the battle against her because he got paid to do that. And we have Day, who's Morveer, the poisoner's apprentice, try to betray him and poison him, but then he ends up killing her, and then he tries to kill Monza later, and there's all this betrayal going on, and all this, the switching of the dynamics and the motivations between the characters, like you were talking about it's like how you're mentioning how Shivers tells Monza that, you know, revenge won't make you feel any better, and she's telling him trying to be a morally good person won't make you feel any better either. And there are all these plot twists that are so much fun to get into. Also, like that character Shanked, and how he like is so strong that he can literally kill people by running his hand through them with his bare hands, and we find out that he eventually is actually on Monza's side. There's so much cool stuff in terms of all that.
Well, let's talk about the crew before we go into Shanked, because Shanked's
for sure
the end of it. So what about Friendly? What did you think of Friendly?
Oh, I love Friendly too. He's so awesome. That like he was like he's a fucking psychopathic mass murderer who's obsessed with counting, and he due to his time in prison, which they call safe, which I love. That's such a great Joe Abercrombie thing. They call prison safe because safety. Sorry, because you're safe from other people. And he learned to be a really good cook in prison, so he makes good food too. And then he ends up betraying Monza and fighting for Casca, and that ends up leading to one of my favorite fights in the whole book, which is that fight between Friendly and Shivers. But yeah, I love Friendly, even though he's not even the best of the kind of good, morally gray characters who are a little bit better than the most evil characters.
I'm really interested to know what Dusty thinks of Friendly, because I'm sure he has thoughts. But one of the things that I love about Friendly is that I think Friendly, genuinely, there's a chance that he could have just lived a good life, but he needs someone else to help him live that, because he doesn't seem to have an understanding of what is actually morally right and wrong, not clearly. And one of the things that he loved about Safety is that in Safety, there were lots of rules, and people told you when to get up, when to go to sleep, when to eat. And there was even rules for like when to fight, you know? And so because of that, like he became one of the bosses inside Safety, like as a prisoner. And so like when he mentions at one point that there was a riot at Safety, and the thing that actually stopped it was people like him going, hey, no. Like, we need to put the rules back in place. And so it was actually prisoners like him that ended up bringing the riot to an end. But, and so you get this idea that he's this gentle giant and he's this nice guy. And then at one point, he goes and he's like, oh, yeah, I was in Safety and it was the place I loved. And the guy's like, well, where is that? It's like, it's a prison. It's like, oh, so you were falsely accused? And he's like, oh, no.
No, I did it. First time I went there for stealing. Second time I went there for stealing and killing 14 people. Oh, you were innocent though. No, I was guilty.
Yeah, totally guilty. And that's so awesome, because normally the human response is to hide our sins, right? Is to say, oh, no, it's not me. But he just doesn't know enough. He's not clued in. He doesn't have the shame of it that most people would have. And so that's what makes Friendly incredibly dangerous. And at the end, obviously, Friendly goes back to prison and he's happy about it. He's incredibly happy about it because he just wants a simple life. And, you know, if he could just run a gambling den and just look after the gaming table and watch people throw dice all day, he wouldn't kill anybody.
Yeah. That's interesting that he needs that externally imposed moral structure on him.
He does.
That's it. That's interesting because you see that in movies and TV shows about prisoners, and you hear that about prisoners in real life too, that and even you could even compare this to soldiers too. Like sometimes they get PTSD after war because they're so used to that camaraderie and doing things as a group with their fellow soldiers, and having that externally imposed moral structure and just strict routine that you stick to every day that helps keep you doing the right thing. That seems like a common thing among prisoners and soldiers. I would think.
Strict rules, right? Strict rules.
Yeah.
Rules for everything. Rules for when to get up, when to go to sleep. And like you probably don't know this about me. I may have mentioned it before, but like I went on a mission for 2 years, and in my faith. And when we're on a mission, when you go on that, there's a lot of rules. Even rules like get up at 7. Yeah. Like, and so you do every day, you get at the same time, and you go to bed at the same time every day. You got to be back in the apartment at the same time every day. And so it's quite strict. And when you get home and you just can go to sleep whenever you want and wake up whenever you want, at first it does take a rejig of your brain. And like also when you're on your mission, you don't go anywhere on your own. You always have another guy with you the entire time. It's probably because they know they're letting 2 19-year-olds loose in France. Probably best that they don't go anywhere on their own. But like you don't go anywhere on your own. Like wherever I go, he goes. And so suddenly being on my own was weird. I was like, oh, like no one to talk to. Like this is odd. Like, you know, I couldn't like got into a job as a security guard and just walked around on my own for hours, it would have driven me insane.
Yeah,
just
that's
while I got used to
interesting.
real life again. It was weird. It was weird. So I
That's
think maybe that's it
interesting.
for friendly, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting too. The religion itself is a good example of that too, because one of the, like, as you were illustrating there, one of the main appeals of religion to people is this sense of community that people get from it, and also this, this set of rituals that you get into, where the religious rituals, there especially are a lot of more of those in Catholicism than more of the Protestant churches nowadays. But then they're, one of the appeals of the more evangelical churches to people too is that they tend to have bands, and there's more there, and there's almost like a more closely bonded community and stuff. I'm just saying there's a lot of variation between different religions, but those are some of the appeals of religion in general to people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess.
I mean, obviously,
what did you think of?
Yeah, what do you think of Friendly?
What do you think of Friendly?
Well, I think if we were to give him a Dungeons and Dragons alignment, it would be somewhere between lawful neutral and lawful evil. But when I think of Friendly, he is the epitome of order. That is him. Like the counting, that's all about order. We have him. He almost has an OCD tendency with this counting, because there is a time where he was making a meal for the group, and he really wanted to make sure everybody got an even portion of the meal, even particular to, I want to make sure there's this number of pieces of meat in everyone's bowl and this number of pieces of mushroom. Like, that's how obsessive that he was with order. And he mentioned that when he wasn't able to do that, it really, really bothered him. Like, it kind of occupied his brain that he wasn't able to, but he said that he was still able to function with simply making sure that they each got the same number of ladlefuls of soup. So I thought he had like this tendency of some type of form of obsessive compulsion disorder.
I think that's total. I think you're totally right about that, because I have OCD, but I didn't actually notice that as much until you mentioned it, because I'm so used to that sort of behavior in myself, like just randomly counting things or having to have things in the certain place, or, oh shit, I did this before I did this, even though it doesn't actually matter, but that's the wrong order or something like that. So yeah, that's a good point.
Also Friendly.
It's also.
We go ahead, Tristram.
No, I didn't want to cut you off. Just another thing, I just like Friendly's mind just works differently, doesn't it? Like you said, and probably it's somewhere on the spectrum. And like, for example, when they go into the bank, like Friendly counts everyone there, like without even trying. They're just like, how many people? He's like, this many. And like I've met people who can do that. That you can drop a tray of beads on the floor and they'll just tell you how many beads there are. Exactly.
Like a Rain Man type of thing.
And you're like, you can't possibly know. Yeah, they just look at it and they can tell how many are there. And it's just the way their brain works. I know a girl who, when she met me, the second time she ever met me, she told me, oh, you're Tristram Johnson. Your birthday was on Saturday, the 13th of June, 1981. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, your birthday will be a Wednesday this year. And it will be, and I'm like, what? And just her brain just has calendars. And like that is what triggers for her. Like, if she meets you, she finds out your birthday, and then she knows it forever. And she knows exactly what day your birthday will be that year, every single time. And that is just something in her head that works instantly, and it takes her no time to work it out. And so I just found that really interesting. And I think Friendly's a bit like that in his own way. Like the way he was just like, there's this many people in that army. There's this many things here. There's this many steps. At one point, he counts steps. I think when they're going round for the bank, the guards, he knows exactly how many minutes and seconds it's going to be. And I think that shows that his brain is not what we call neuronormative. Like there is something distinctly different in his brain that allows him to do things that others cannot do, but also stops him from doing things that others find particularly normal, like being able to make weighted judgments.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well said.
He also derives sexual pleasure from numbers, because there's this one scene early on when they're trying to break in the bank where Day, Mauveur's assistant, is tasked with counting the minutes or seconds to make sure they have a beat on the patrol routes of the guards. And when he starts listening to her counting and he gets sexually aroused from it, I thought that was super funny.
I forgot about that.
Because that's like the only time you get any. Well, there's parts where there's emotion. When his system of relying on numbers becomes in doubt, like when someone accuses the dice of lying, it just completely flips out.
Oh,
that's so cool too. The first time we see him kill in the book, he's just obsessing over the numbers 6 and 1 in his head. So then he kills one guy by slitting, or I forget how exactly he does it, but he kills one guy with 1 stab or slash, and then he kills the other one with 6 because of the numbers 6 and 1 on the die.
Yeah, he's pretty crazy when it comes to that stuff. And then another thing is like the main reason he left Murcatto, and he told her straight up, is that her life is too chaotic and he couldn't handle the chaos that came with that. So he is much more used to having this orderly lifestyle. At least when he worked for Sir John, he had a pretty routine lifestyle. He was just sitting in one place, and then he would have to go collect debt. It wasn't very different from his day-to-day activities. As soon as he's traveling around, and then all of these different assassinations, they're all different. And sometimes the plans that go as well as they do, he just can't handle that. And that's when he is like, yeah, I had enough. And I think he says he had enough after they take out the fencing master guy that they were almost going to get killed by. That's when he quit. But yeah, Friendly is definitely a weird, interesting character that is fairly different from any other characters that he wrote in this book. He's just kind of, wow, this guy is strange.
Yeah.
So should we talk the poisoner?
Actually, I don't. Actually, what did you think about Casca, Dusty? I don't really think we got much of your thoughts on Casca.
No, he was away.
Yeah, Casca. Okay, this is from what I remember because I just read the second half of the book, the first half, and I know in the first half when they fight the fencer, he gets stabbed through the gut, and I know he shows up later after that. One of the things I thought was interesting is that Casca actually goes on his own revenge plot towards the end of the book, because there are these generals who basically they betrayed him, and they went over to Murcatto's side, and they're mercenaries. They're going to go to whoever's side's successful or whoever's paying the most money. But he was going to go ahead and become the leader of the Thousand Arms again, and he was not going to tolerate the previous treachery. So he goes out and systematically, like one by one, kills these top officers who had betrayed him. And I don't know if he did it out of revenge, because if he's being pragmatic, I don't see that he needs a reason to kill them, but it seems he does it more out of these guys betrayed me, and I'm gonna have to get rid of them. And the interesting thing is that doesn't quite
Right.
work the same for Murcatto, who also betrayed him. But he has like mixed emotions because one, he basically raised her from a child. So this is like his living, almost his most precious offspring, you know. So he's kind of seems that he's very torn about what to do with Murcatto. He doesn't know if he should kill her or if, you know, this is my legacy. Let her, you know, live on. But yeah, he's an
Yeah.
interesting character. I know this is not the last time we see him if we continue with more of these books. But I think my favorite portrayal of him is probably in this standalone. Because there's in other books where you have really mixed emotions about him, and even like, man, what happened to this guy? But yeah, I thought his dialogue was great. He's like always drunk, and he knows he's a drunk, and he doesn't deny it at all. He's not in denial. The only thing he's in denial about
Yeah.
is like, oh, I could stop drinking at any time. It's like, yeah, guy,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not happening.
I'm gonna. Yeah. At one point, he tells Monza that. Didn't you hear? I'm done drinking now. Oh yeah, I've heard that before. Oh yeah, I'm sure you're quitting.
But he does a pretty good job at like reducing at least the amount he drinks. So
Yeah.
he did. It's almost like
He
he
tricks
needed
them.
something to occupy himself in order to not
Yeah.
want to like fall
To
to the
drink.
bottle. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, you see that when he gets into like more of a powerful position for sure. But then because he can't because he can't totally quit alcohol, that ends up being his downfall because that's how Morvir ends up poisoning him. That's a good segue actually into you wanted to get into Morvir next, Tristram.
did.
Yeah, he's a really interesting character too. Like for multiple reasons, as we were alluding to earlier, like how Day, his apprentice, tries to betray him and poison him based on Monza warning her about how much of a bad idea it is to trust him, and then he turns the tables on her and ends up poisoning and killing her, and then he ends up trying to kill her with one of his poisonous blow darts at one point. And he's interesting because he's all like stuck up and sure of himself, and he talks to Shivers at one point about how this science stuff is really superior. That magic stuff you're talking about, that's stupid. It doesn't exist. There's a scientific explanation. And I like it because I like him because I like him because I don't like him as a character, but Joe Abercrombie does such a good job of making him an unlikable character.
Yeah, it's funny because he's kind of he becomes self-aware that he's unlikable.
Yes.
And it seems like even when he tries to not be unlikable, it's hard to shake because nobody expects him. Because there's this one point in the story where he's like, you know what, I kind of need to change. Because there's a point where I think he gets in an argument with Murcatto, and then it's either Murcatto or Shivers, and then he kind of just like becomes very submissive and he apologizes. And then they're like looking at him strangely, like he has some type of plot. And then there's the other part where he's like, "Oh yeah, I really like to cook this one mushroom soup that I was taught a long time ago," and he cooks it for everybody. And he gets really offended that everyone thinks that he's trying to poison them all, but it's just genuinely like a really good soup. And this is shortly like before the whole incident with with Day, where Murcatto poisoned the well, so to speak, and he was talking to his assistant, but he was being like sarcastic and not serious. But what his assistant heard was what she thought was a serious conversation about betraying Murcatto. And
Right.
then, yeah, in his mind, he's just trying to use it to um, kind of put his apprentice off balance a little bit. But he wasn't really truly intending at all to betray her, because in his mind, he said, yeah, you never betray someone who had hired you. So he wasn't going to do that. So because the well was poisoned, Day poisons Mauvir with a fake poison that he created. And then he hits her with a fake poison, and he gives her an antidote of poison. So yeah, I thought it was kind of sad and messed up, because I do see that like Murcatto definitely had a huge role in that and how that played out. So I think he is a little bit justified in trying to kill Murcatto. It just shows that he wasn't just this heartless dude, that he did kind of care about his apprentice. But once the well was poisoned in such a way, there was no way for Mauvir to have any trust whatsoever in his apprentice after that moment. So he felt it was just like better off killing her than to have someone that he has to like look over his back at all the time.
And Monza definitely did manipulate Day to do that. I don't know if she was necessarily trying to get her to kill Mauvir, but she definitely influenced her, at least influenced Day to do that, at least.
Yeah, so definitely.
Yeah, like there's no, like Day was just thinking, I'll apprentice under him and then eventually I'll take over. And in the beginning part of the book, it's always the two of them are in cahoots. And it's like they're like looking at everyone, at the others, thinking, you noobs, basically. Like the whole time. And Day and him are sharing this inside joke all the time. What do I always say, Day? And all this sort of stuff. But then
never take chances.
Yeah, and the thing is, right, Mauvir is, in my opinion, the only person in this crew who is actually an assassin. Like Mauvir is and just to be clear, he is exactly what he says he is. He is the best poisoner in the world. He is freaking amazing at it. And if she had just got out of his way, and given him the time, he would have killed off everybody. Like, and probably no one would have died. Yeah,
she had some morals. Well, that first job went horribly bad to her eyes.
But if she just trusted him, but of course you can't trust him because he's a freaking poisoner, and she's just been betrayed. So there's like no trust. But if it was like Tristram Johnson, like I trust everybody, and I was completely different, so I wanted to kill everybody, and I hired that guy. I'd be like, I'm hiring you. Go do it. Come back and tell me when it's done. I go home and read some Joe Abercrombie books, and then have him call me when it's done. But like she just does not trust him an inch, and in the end causes far more trouble for herself. And if she would, because he wasn't actually going to betray her. If poisoners get known for poisoning the people who hire them, no one hires them, so they don't do it. But poisoners get betrayed themselves all the time. So guess what? They learn to protect themselves. And that's what Day and Monza should have realized. But they screw him over. And then because he is a psychopath, sociopath, in that he doesn't care. Like, if you betray me, I will kill you. Like, there is no emotional compunction to prevent that. And it's a shame that in the end, it's her lack of trust that creates all her betrayals. Like Shivers was totally never going to betray her, but he turns against her. Friendly was never going to turn against her, but he ends up being on the other side. And the Mauvir was never going to betray her, and he ends up being on the other side. I've got to say, I think the character of Mauvir is excellent.
I like his writing. Like his dialogue is amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
And No, you mean his internal monologues, or you mean the
Well,
way
just the way he talks to
his
everybody and the way
repartee?
he talks to himself. Yeah. So, in like one of the funniest moments in this entire book is when he's at the bank and he's scoping it out, and he has all these like multiple ways of killing and poisoning, and they all get interrupted, like every single one. It's just he's like describing the intricacies of the way that he's gonna do it, and then boom, like the guy that Moffus, the guy that's gonna poison, just like halts any progress in that particular way of
Yeah,
assassination. It's
yeah.
just so funny. I had to listen to that section like 2 or 3 times.
And yet the thing that's
Yeah.
so cool about him is that's why he never loses, because he brings up so many plans. He's like, if he shakes my hand, he's dead. Okay. Well, if he takes this, he's dead. Okay. Well, if he does this, he's dead. Well, if he doesn't do any of those, I'm going to come in at night and poison his freaking ink. Yeah, I'm going to get him. And that's like why Morvir always wins. And like when he's going back on the zipline thing and it all goes wrong, you think, oh, he's going to die. But no, he doesn't die. And he's so freaking careful. And then at the end, when he does the crown thing, he literally takes out the entire leadership of like Orso's enemies in one fell swoop. If it wasn't for Mons wearing that stupid glove, he'd have taken her too. I mean, it was perfect. And
Yeah,
the
that reminds me too of when they do that kind of bank heist. So he can poison the banker. He poisons all of the books instead of just that one, so that all of them die. Well, you want to cover your bases and not take chances, as is his philosophy, right?
Yeah, and if you don't care about death, and he does not, just be sure. And like I really think the character is fantastic. One of the things I love about him as well is Joe Abercrombie, right? Because he's made him unlikable, really unlikable, but he's very proactive and he's very, very, very expert. And because of that, we can still enjoy the character, even though he himself is just really not a nice person. The way he defeats Day is super clever. I love that. That's brilliant. The way he does the banker is super clever. The way he does Monza is super clever. And the fact is, the only way he can really be beaten is by outthinking himself, which of course he eventually does.
Yeah,
and that's
that's
the only person who could beat him was himself by thinking a bit too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think he is actually. I think he. One last thing I want to say is that normally when people have like an expert at anything, they have to also make them like a great fighter. He is clearly not a good fighter. He's a rubbish fighter.
Oh yeah.
If he's going to kill you, he's going to like stab you immediately with a pin or a needle or something. Because if it comes to an actual fight, he is toast. But he never ever gets there because of how he is planned. And I think that's really cool that Joe Abercrombie didn't slip into making his master poisoner also like an Artemis Entree kind of character. Okay. No.
There were definitely some multi-talented folks there, especially when they did the ball, like in the prostitute house. Like you had all of these like musicians and performers that were also like killers, like the guy who hid an axe inside of a lute. And there were some that were bad too. Like there's the one that was like an expert knife thrower, but they were really indiscriminate in who they threw their knives at. And you had the guy that all he does is blow fire. Like that's both his act and his weapon is blowing fire. Like that's his specialty. He's like, oh yeah, he can blow fire, so I guess he's dangerous, but he's also entertaining. Oh, and I forgot about the multiple revenge plots too, because we forgot to mention Greylock, who wanted to get revenge for Ulfrith. And it's funny because Shiver's like, Ulfrith, we basically took that place with like very little bloodshed. And the ones that they actually killed, the ones in the beginning, who were
his
like on the
brother.
lookout. One of them was his brother. And I forgot it was
Right.
like Black Dow. I think he probably killed him.
Yeah,
Right.
and remember, Shivers was in it because his brother was killed, right? I mean,
Right.
originally. So it's like it's just a beautiful parallel. Again,
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
Abercrombie, you sadistic genius.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
like as you mentioned, the Bloody Nine, aka Logan Nine Fingers, killed Shivers' brother.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
there really is so many interesting parallels. I forgot to mention this earlier when you mentioned this one, Tristram. The fact that Monza wants to be with Shivers, but then she's basically considering being with Rogant instead when he ideally takes over the control of the Empire from Duke Orso, even though she doesn't like him, just to
Yeah.
serve her higher interests. It reminds me of kind of that parallel between Jazal and I think, is it Addie in
Right.
First Law, who he ends up marrying
Yeah.
even though he's in love with someone else because it's the proper thing to do, and we find out that she's a lesbian and hates him anyway. So
Yeah, in this book,
yeah,
he
it's
still doesn't know
interesting.
that she's a lesbian, by the
No,
way.
Yeah,
but no,
yeah,
she hides
exactly.
it because she
Yeah.
can't admit it even to like her father, and so like her father
It's
hates
funny
her.
because everybody knows that she's a
I know.
lesbian.
Well,
Like
Yeah.
Mercatto knew.
not everybody, but like yeah, the people in the know all know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
because
remember,
Mercatto knew she was a lesbian.
yeah, because
Yeah.
Murcatto's in with her dad, right? Like she's in the inner circle.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, you know when like people getting their brothers killed, if you notice that like we talked about Greylock and Shivers, but of course
Uh-huh.
Murcatto's brother has also been killed by
Yeah.
Orso, which
Yeah.
is what this whole book's
Mm-hmm.
about. So everyone getting their
Yeah.
brother killed and coming for revenge, but responding in very different ways.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting too that she wanted to kill the brother who was like, no, I can't stand for any of this. And he walked
Correct.
out. I
Correct.
Yeah.
was like,
But we
And she only wanted to, like, her reason for killing him was to hurt Orso, even though
yeah,
he
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't a part of that plot.
Yeah.
correct. And all seven of the revenges are different kinds of revenge, aren't they? She kills them in
Mm-hmm.
different ways, but they're actually different kinds of revenge. One of them is like the idiot brother who's a bumbling fool, but he was there because he's a sadistic piece of crap, and his dad is the one doing the murdering. Orso is the mastermind, but does not get physically involved. So it's more the intellectual and the power play. And so the revenge on him is likewise. One of them is like a military guy. His defeat is sword to sword, or that's how she tries to do it. And when Koska turns up and they try and take him 2-on-1, I started to
Mhm.
think that they might actually beat it with swordplay. But the thing that was really, I did not expect is he just straight up says he's better than both of them. Like, that's how
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
freaking good he is. Like, he is like, oh, I guess I'll have to take you left-handed. Kind of that sort
He's
of level of guy.
also very proudly gay.
Oh,
Because they try to
absolutely.
insult him, like, oh, you're taking up the
Oh, I
butt. And
forgot
he's like,
about that.
and
Yeah.
he's like,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, of
That's
course I'm going to
the
do
only way. But
Yeah.
that.
but I love how to get him they got him through his art. Like
Yeah.
Yes,
they go
yes.
and get the fat guy who's like basically got no ability to fight, and they're just like, come on, fight. And he's like, no. And it's like, he's gonna come nick your painting. He's like, hey, that little dirty scum, he's not getting my paintings. And it's like these two art critics who just despise each other. And one of them's this fat slob, one of them's this expert duelist. And it's just brilliant how she turns the art thing into doing it. And of course, that's where the whole thing with the eye has gone wrong. And like when it's
Mm-hmm.
happened, he's kind of like it's just so sad because it's like if they would have just believed them, it would never have occurred. Like,
Yeah.
and then, but when it does happen, he's like, oh, shame. Oh, well. And
Yeah,
like,
like he got his revenge on the torturer.
holy crap, he did.
Yeah.
Like, you think I'm going to let you get away with that? No.
No, that's like they changed him like forever.
And it also, that was also what changes his relationship with Monza as well, because he crosses over, but also Monza. And again, this is so Joe Abercrombie, right? She feels guilty because she knows the reason that he's like that is because of her, and yet she doesn't find him attractive. She doesn't find it attractive. She finds it hard to look at, and
it's
that
funny
is
because she's like has a crippled hand and she's all like scarred and cut up too.
Yeah,
And he like
and she knows
caresses
it.
her head that's like filled with coins.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care like about any of that stuff.
I know, and so that's what's so amazing, because she knows that's super hypocritical, and so like, and we hear it in her brain that she knows it's hypocritical, but it's just the truth, and that's so Joe Abercrombie to say no one's allowed to say I find my crippled husband no longer attractive, but actually there probably is that problem. I remember saying to my family once that like I'm pretty much like, me and my wife are mediocre people. Like we are not super hot people. It's like, you can't say that. I'm like, I can say that. That is logical. like we're attractive enough to each other, but like we both know that we're not A-grade stuff. And like, you can't say that. I just did. And I think Joe Abercrombie is like not afraid to like say things that a lot of us might think inside, but would never say outside because of how it would be taken by the people around us. And some of those hard truths is what he's made his books based on.
Yeah, but also like when they describe Murcatto in various instances, like everyone still says that she's hot. And even one of the princes, after seeing her mangled hand, he's like, "Oh, that's exotic." You know, it's not like a turnoff to him at all.
No, and she is specifically noted as being markedly hot, whereas like they don't say that about like some authors can't resist saying that about every single person who's a woman. They just can't resist.
Oh, but, like Robert Jordan, every time, how many times does he say she folded her arms beneath her breasts?
But that doesn't mean she's pretty.
Well, he does have like, oh my God, she's the most beautiful woman ever. Oh, this woman, she's even more beautiful. Oh, this one, that one's nothing compared to this next one.
It's always from the POV from characters, so it's usually what that character's taste is. Because we know Matt, he likes thick girls. He doesn't like girls that are skinny. He likes older women. He doesn't really like super young girls. So it's really depending on which character is doing that observation.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt, who likes these buxom older women, ends up with freaking Tuon, who's built like a stick. And
that's true.
Some people think she might be a child.
That's true.
But that's the whole point of Matt, isn't it? That he doesn't get like the obvious person for him to be with is like Giselle, right? The big buxom maid. Like that would have been like, peasant girl, and instead he marries an empress who looks like a slightly childlike,
like a shaved boy. A boy with a shaved head.
But you're absolutely right. Robert Jordan luxuriated in women and often described them as very attractive. There's very few he described as unattractive.
Well, the ones that are unattractive are simply, he simply calls them handsome.
but Abercrombie does, like he clearly shows you that Vitari is a plane. She is, and that that there's various characters who have aged, for example, and he describes them as old. I wasn't expecting Carlo van Ida to return in this book. I tell you that for sure.
And she kind of ratted them out too.
Yeah, I was. Oh, that's totally in character. But I was surprised how many people he managed to bring back in. Like I didn't see Koska coming, and I'd never been able. Carlo van Ida and Greylock. What the crap? He's a Vitari even. He's a sadistic genius. I love the way that each of the killings is different. I love the way that like one of them is a no-fault killing. Like he wasn't even really involved, and she kills him anyway. This stupid guy who was not really aware of the plan, botched it up, killed him as well. The one who was her true friend killed him as well, and the one who was like a proper bastard, the bodyguard, who was just an
The first
absolute
guy.
Yeah, he's scum of the earth. He's like a rapist and a murderer. And
And she tried to kill them all in similar ways to how they did damage to her, because he bashed his hand up with a hammer.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all parallels. The whole thing is parallels. And that's like, some of that is because she's tried to make it so, but some of it's obviously because, and like the banker, of course, he doesn't actually touch her because he's a banker. I'm not actually involved, and she doesn't actually touch him, does she? He let other people deal with her. She lets other people deal with him, and like that sort of impersonalness to his death is really interesting. And Yoru Sulfur, loved the clip of him at the bank. I was like, oh, freaking Yoru Sulfur. And then when he turns up at the end, I'm like, just like just like Glocta, she's gonna have to bow to Bayet's and the House of Valtenborg. And then of course, because of Shanked, like
Shanked is like the wild card.
Did you realize?
Yeah, let's get into Shanked. He's one of my favorite characters in this too.
Shanked is also Vitari's husband.
Yeah, and did you realize that he was the same guy from the beginning?
No, I didn't. No, that was a huge surprise to me. He's the guy who heals Monza at the beginning of the book. I was thinking, about this in my reread of it, Dusty, how I won't mention the characters so it's not spoiled for Tristram, but how he does that in a similar way with like one of the main characters in Red Country, right? He has this like he doesn't tell you the true identity of the character, and then at like towards the end of the book you realize this is the true identity of the character. He does that with Shanked in this book. He heals Monza, but we don't know who he is exactly. And then we have this character Shanked going around killing people left and right in brutal ways, and he's so powerful that he can stick his bare hand through someone and kill them that way, or just throw them against a wall and kill them that way. And then we find out that he's the guy who healed Monza, and he's been on her side the whole time.
I have no idea, because it seems like that personality doesn't even seem that similar at all.
Yeah.
And of course he's also Vitari's husband, so throw that in there as well. He's a really strange character, and he must be an eater, right? He must be.
Yeah, he's definitely an eater. There's a part where
I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's true.
He's definitely one, because there's a part where of course Shivers and Monza get taken uninterrupted, and some assassins come in, and Shivers takes care of most of them, but they leave, and then in comes Shanked, and he looks at the people, and then he strips the female assassin down, chops her leg off, and trims it and puts it in his bag. And he's like, oh, she's not going to need her liver. That's going to make like a tasty stew. And he cuts her liver out. So I was like, oh yeah, this guy's an eater.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So you did you catch that? So I guess you didn't get to that point in the book in your reread yet.
No,
so
did you
not catch that the first time you read it though, Dusty?
The first time I read it, I still didn't catch it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I caught it with the big reveal at the end, but it was totally surprising to me. I didn't see it coming at all. Did you, Tristram?
No. That's why I brought it up. I think it was hugely surprising.
I thought that he discovered her, and then he took her to the healer. I didn't know he was the one that was actually the guy.
Oh, okay.
And it suggests that he has, like, one of the things that's interesting as well is that Abercrombie is he doesn't give us, like, some people are very clear about where they stand. C.S. Lewis, for example, is very, very clear about where he stands on subjects. But Abercrombie doesn't even he does have messages in his books, but they're mixed, and you can pick which of the message you want to listen to, right? You can, and like, so for example, there is, if you want to, you could see in his books an expose of religion as not effective, or as telling lies. You can also see it as an indictment of royalty or an indictment of any political system. You can see, like, for example, the one that had the voting council and how corrupt they are, or mercantilism and capitalism. But one of the things in this is he has two characters here who do something very, very scientific. And like, so, you know, the poisoner who doesn't believe in magic, right? Which makes complete sense not to believe in magic. But actually, we know in this book that there's something kind of magic.
There is a soft magic system we know from First Law.
It's funny because Morveer sees the magic firsthand, and this startles him so much that he spilled soup in Vatari's lap, and that's when the Gurkish eater showed up.
Right.
The mummy lady.
Oh, no, the woman. Yes.
Yeah,
when she appears out of
lady.
nowhere. She was freakish. But like, the cool thing is, you can be on any side. And if you're someone who finds sometimes that science doesn't have all the answers, like people who believe in the paranormal or something like that,
I find that just out of my appreciation of post-structuralist philosophers like Foucault and Derrida.
Well, absolutely. But the point is that no matter who you are, right, you can find an argument that George Abercrombie makes, because he, instead of doing it from George Abercrombie's point of view, it's like he does it from the characters' point of views. And so you can see people who have extremely non-politically correct views shown in George Abercrombie books. And so if you have you can look at those from any angle. And you can see it as a criticism of science, a criticism of magic, a criticism of mysticism. Or you can see it as saying that everyone's got a place, right down to the murderers. And so it's really, really interesting. And again, something that I think very few people do, that he absolutely does.
Yeah, I like that. I like it. To me, there are pros and cons of both approaches, whether the author's moral message is super explicit, or they just do it in kind of a neutral way, just presenting characters' different perspectives on it. I can appreciate both, but yeah, one thing that I like, one thing that's good about the clear moral message is that they often make kind of strong arguments through the narrative about that, and it's convincing. Like, you understand where the author is coming from usually if it's executed well, even if you don't necessarily agree with their conclusions. But with what's great about this approach is, like you said, you can kind of just choose your own adventure in terms of what message to take from it. And you can see a lot of good points that a lot of the characters make. And the point is just, here are a bunch of really different cynical perspectives. Pick one appeals to you. Which one appeals to you the most?
I guess if Joe Abercrombie does have an overall message, it's be cynical.
Yes. Yeah.
The world is probably worse than you think it is. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
It's just what I need to hear. This is why
exactly.
I will read Joe Abercrombie, and I will appreciate him to the end of the earth. But I will always, like, I will never read him like I read Brandon Sanderson, right?
Yeah.
Because I can read Brandon Sanderson every month. Joe Abercrombie, I need a few months in between to kind of like reset my brain. I feel a little bit dirty after I've read this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I think his next book's a little darker, I think.
Oh, he's dark enough already.
The Age of Madness trilogy?
No, Heroes.
Red Country? Heroes. Okay.
Oh, Heroes. Yeah, Heroes.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading next.
We'll have to talk about that soon too. Before we talk about that though, for our next episode, before that, because I like to jump back and forth, let's get into Mistborn Era 2, the first book, which is Alloy of Law.
Oh
yeah,
yes. I need some lighthearted steampunk cowboy stuff to get me away from this cynical, everyone's
Yeah.
going to die in a beautiful parody of death.
I find
Yeah.
that the first book is the most Western of the ones that he wrote for the second era.
Yeah.
It almost feels like each of them has a little different taste. Like the first one's
for
very
sure.
Western, the second one is very social uprising, and the third one is very like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're all different plot structures, aren't they? The first one is a heist, like against the bank robbers. The second one is a whodunit murder mystery and trying to catch the killer. And then the third one is try and find the treasure. So they are distinct, different plot archetypes.
Yeah, for sure. And I love too how in Era 2 of First Law, or not First Law, Era 2 of Mistborn, with each book in the trilogy, they kind of increase the integration of the larger Cosmere concepts and characters. Like we have basically the god forms of Kelsier and Vin coming back, and there's more stuff with ancient lore and stuff that's going to be really awesome when the Lost Metal Book 4 of Era 2 comes out. But so yeah, did you guys have kind of like a favorite execution of one of the characters that Monza wanted to get revenge against in the book? I have trouble deciding. Like, one of my favorites was that guy who they're fighting, and then the statue kills him by falling on top of him, and the statue's sword stabs him through. That was just like such a random Joe Abercrombie, just sloppy random death. I like that one.
Yeah, I think he was trying to say the art that he was obsessing over so much was what killed him.
Yeah, like you guys mentioned. Yeah.
But also like the fact that like he could not be killed by skill. Because he was literally just way better than them. And like I did not expect that. I did not expect someone to legitimately just be better, which is, if they hadn't tried to do their stupid little ambush on her and they just said to him, when we're in the room, you just pull out your sword and kill her, it could have been over. In the very first chapter, because he didn't muck up with at all. And you just think, oh, why did you have to try your little move? Anyway, I think the one with the most pathos is Faithful Carpi. When you find out that he didn't really want to betray her, just like in a way she didn't really want to betray Koska, and what happened was like Benna went and got all of them to say yes, and then they came to her and said it's like a done deal. Oh, and then she was kind of trapped. And then basically they did the same to him. Orso did the same to him against her. He got everyone else to already agree, and it was already a done deal, and it was die with you or like try and keep things going after you leave. And it's such a shame. And again, he felt let down by her, just like she'd felt let down by things. So the pathos of that, the fact that at the end she wants to not kill him and even tries to save him, but it's too late. It just the emotional impact of that death was the most powerful for me. The death I like the least, the cleverest death I think though is the poisoner. The poisoner and everything to do with him, I just find incredibly clever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I thought that was really interesting about like Monza and Orso was that like right in the very beginning, and this is all from Monza's perspective, in her mind she believes that the murder of her and her brother was senseless, that it made no sense, like they were not trying to take over, but it just so happens that her brother was actually quite ambitious. And it was almost like Orso really was trying to protect himself, because Denna was quite ambitious and he did like to scheme himself.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, for
interesting
sure.
seeing how like that initial um, killing was actually not as unjustified as we thought it was in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Like, there's even more of a betrayal of that Bennett does of Monza than we expect, and that's another one of the just endless betrayals in this, and that's interesting too because it reminded me that one aspect that I really like of this book is all of the flashbacks with Benna and Monza when they were growing up and how their parents got killed, and then they were farmers, and then they ended up just killing people well enough to join the army, and then they eventually climb the ranks and became experts at killing. So, and it really, as we were talking about it, it reminds
Mm-hmm.
me of how good Joe Abercrombie is at character development, because it really establishes the strength of the relationship between Benna and Monza.
You know what? It also establishes of it establishes Mansa's relationship with revenge. So you see at an early
Yeah.
age,
Mm-hmm.
he's just a child, and this group of farmers that was investigating and goes to their place, and they say, "Yeah, we've know that there's these bandits around, and we're gonna go try to take care of them." And she wants to go, and she does end up going and taking her father's sword and participating in that. So at a very young
Mm-hmm.
age, she's has this experience with revenge. So it's almost like her first instinct if she's for betrayal and for anyone that hurts her family to lash out back at those who perpetrated it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So,
But yeah, I would
yeah,
have to
another.
agree with Tristram though. I really, really enjoyed the poisoning. I thought that was really fun um, and clever. Also, I really liked uh, the masquerade ball. I thought that one was
Yeah,
pretty funny because so
yeah,
much went
definitely.
wrong. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, it sounds like everything is just kind of falling apart here. And um, we got to see another character like Jazal,
Yeah.
like unexpectedly show up, and he's still like kind of a womanizer still,
Mm-hmm.
even though he does. Like I would understand if he knew his wife was a lesbian, but he doesn't even know that,
But
and
no,
he's
because what it is that he's seeking for some kind of love, isn't he? That's what Jezal actually wants. He wants to be loved, and not only sexually, but like to be wanted, to be loved, to have someone desire him. And like
mhm,
even before, even like when he was doing it in the ring as a sword player, he wants
uh,
the adoration of crowds, and he clearly doesn't have it. Even though because of what Bayetz has done, his wife is now pretending to be interested in him so that he will have sex with her in order to have an heir. That's like the
Right.
mhm,
deal that Bayetz did with her, which made his life a lot better. But he still knows that deep down there's something wrong, that this woman
mhm,
doesn't like him and is and that's come across, and he wants to just be wanted, and that's his tragedy, that he is the attractive saber sword wielding duelist who's king of the best place to be king of in the entire world, the supposed nicest country that exists, and he's got this super hot wife, and yet he's miserable. He's rich, powerful. He has a woman, so he's got the money, the power, and the woman. So he should have it all, and yet he feels like he has nothing. And again, that's Joe Abercrombie being, "Hey, look how cynical I can be." But
Yeah.
it's perfect in how he's done it, and he set it up so that we realize that in a way, Jezal wishes he was with this slightly messed up, West girl, even though she had nothing to offer him other than like their initial relationship. But he would have been happier by far
Yeah.
if that had
He
been allowed
actually
to.
cared about her.
Yeah, he did. He
Mm-hmm.
did. And and that's all Jezal really, really wants. He just wants to be loved. And that's tragic because even though he's in the greatest of all positions, that's the one thing he won't be getting, and not from anybody. It's all fake now. The people who listen to him at court only do it, they pretend to do it. No one's really admiring him or cares about him. And that's, sucks to be Jezal, even though he's king.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mentioned this before, but what did you guys think about it? This is another really interesting part too, because Monza pushes Shivers away. He's almost somewhat justified in betraying her, which results in his fight with Friendly, which, as I said, was one of my favorite fights of the book and was really cool. What did you guys think about that?
I remember the Friendly fight, and I was like, oh man, I don't like these characters fighting each other. Because I didn't want either of them to die, right? I was like,
right.
because I was kind of invested in both. So I was like,
Right.
oh no, these two characters that I kind of like are fighting. That sucks.
Yeah. And it does
sense.
suck because at the beginning, when they meet, there's no way that they should have ended up fighting, right? Like neither of them wanted this. They just got sucked in by Mons Caro. And that's the tragedy, is that if they'd just been left alone, that just would not have occurred.
Yeah,
And
because Sir John got killed too, like the guy that was basically Friendly's boss for a while.
Yeah,
and I was like, why did Shek kill Sir John? Like, was there a real good reason for that?
Shek gives people one chance, and then if they don't take it, he kills them. Like Shek isn't evil, but he has no moral line. Like, so if you basically don't just give him what he wants, he's realized that this is another thing that's interesting about Shek and also Yoru Sulfur to an extent, is that it's, well, what if you didn't actually have to listen to anybody? Like, what if you were so powerful that you didn't have to listen to anybody? And what fiction tells me is that's not good. If you're so powerful that you can beat up everybody and no one can beat you up, that no one can stop you, no one can imprison you, it actually it's not good. It does not lead to a good result.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we're not meant to have that kind of power.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that in there too, for sure. So I want to get into a little bit. I think you and I had talked about this briefly before, Dusty, and I think you had said that you like the First Law trilogy still more than Best Served Cold. But like I said, Best Served Cold is, I would say, it's my favorite grimdark fantasy book, my favorite book by Joe Abercrombie. So, like, what do you guys think in terms of comparison to the First Law trilogy? Let's go with you first, Tristram, actually, because I know this is your first read of it.
I think as an individual book, I think I probably like it more than any individual book from the First Law trilogy because it's so complete. I love the fact that it's got such a very, very tight, well done ensemble piece where it has a beginning with the setup of the betrayal, the build-up of the 7 kills. We go through the 7 kills, but at the same time, we get the ensemble cast together and it dissolves, and it all comes together so neatly in this beautiful parallel with these shout-outs to the First Law trilogy throughout. That is a masterpiece of plotting. However, the First Law trilogy as a whole had a bigger effect on me. And I think that this book sits and rests on that. So as an individual book, I think it's better. But if I get to compare the two full storylines, the reveal with Bites at the end of First Law, I have never in my time reading fantasy had a reveal like that. Not even like Ned Stark dying. That reveal was so unexpected. and so not what I imagined. Even though I was trying to think about it and second guess it, it was amazing. And I think that for me, so that ending holds it. Even though I think as an individual book, this is superior.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fair. I totally understand that. So would you say then, uh, with your mention of Ned Stark getting killed, would you say that that makes were you implying also that the first Song of Ice and Fire book, A Game of Thrones, is actually your favorite grimdark fantasy book, even more than the First Law trilogy, or would you say the trilogy or one of those individual? I know you said this book, Best Served Cold, if you compare it as one book, but the entire trilogy as itself would you say that would be your favorite grimdark fantasy, like if you look at all three of those books as a whole? You still
Am
there?
I back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
My
kind of.
internet just wiped out.
Robot.
I actually
Oh,
prefer.
there we go.
You hear me? I actually prefer a song.
Okay.
I prefer A Song of Ice and Fire, but I'll explain why.
Cliffhanger.
It's not because it's better at grimdark.
I think you're cutting out a little bit there still.
He's absolutely. Okay.
Um,
Well, tell me when I'm
I
back.
think you seem like you're back now.
No? Okay.
Okay.
Well, just for me as Tristram Johnson, if I was going, grimdark is really, I mean, it's not my favorite thing because I do have I'm a bit too prudish for this kind of thing. And so some of it does like rub me up the wrong way and I can't be doing with it. But if I was to choose, I would say George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire, and I'll explain why. It's because I love the history angle. I love the medieval feel of it, the historical level of it. Like some of the bits I loved about this book is when the armies at the end and like had the mass strategy. Loved that. The kings and queens politicking. Loved that. And basically, Martin does that bit better. The families of Westeros are so amazing, and the intricacies of their plots and twists. I prefer that even over this, but I would say that Joe Abercrombie is more surprising even than Martin.
Okay.
I would say that is definitely.
Yeah, that's fair.
His twists catch me more unguarded. Even the Martin is excellent. Don't get me wrong. Martin is brilliant, but I think Abercrombie's twists are amazing. And I think his character work, even though Martin's character work is so good, I think Abercrombie's character work might even be superior.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
That's me.
Yeah, I get your point too. I agree that George R.R. Martin is better about all of the political manipulation stuff too. I don't think Joe Abercrombie does that as much. That's understandable too. Yeah, I understand your take. I love A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones too. I only like First Law slightly more. They're both really up there in terms of how much I love both series. But how about you, Dusty?
I would have to say that I really do enjoy the characters from the first trilogy more. Like Glocta is always really entertaining to read. I love Logan, and I like all the world building that came from the first trilogy, like learning about their gods and their backstory and how they traveled pretty much most of the world. Well, not most of it, but a very large chunk. Like you have battles in different cities. You do get a little bit of the political manipulation stuff. And I like that it's more magical. I like the more magicalness, that there's more use of magic in the first Law trilogy, the very first one. And
That's true.
yeah, it's like, man, Glockta is just like an expert character. Like, I guess I would consider more Veer kind of like the Glockta of this series, just because of his cynicism and how he basically talks down to people in most situations. But yeah, but Glockta is like, he basically became the top guy by the end of the series. Like, he's one below Baez basically in the Union.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I think I do agree with Tristram. As a single book telling a single story, it does an excellent job. But I do like my really expansive and connected stories more. I think the trilogy just gives more page length to dive into that, as opposed to a one-shot story. I think if a movie were ever be made, this would be like the perfect book to choose to make a movie out
Yeah.
of any of Abercrombie's works, because the length, it can fit. I know you'd have to cut a lot out, but
hmm
I think if you went like a fantasy Ocean's 11 type of deal, you can do a pretty good movie
Yeah.
based off of
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
A movie or
Yeah, I see
really
that.
a
I
short
totally get.
miniseries, like a six
Yeah, that would
episode
be cool.
miniseries or 6 or 7 episodes, like each episode dedicated to like the murdering, like one of the revenge,
Yeah.
one of the revenge dudes. So
Yeah.
like eight
Yeah, that would be
episodes. I
really
think they could
cool.
do a really good series of that book in 8 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That would be really cool to see. And yeah, I get what you guys are saying about how the First Law trilogy as a whole, there are some benefits of it in comparison to this, but this being like a standalone story is really good too. That's a good point for sure. And again, I I only have a slight preference for best served cold here. I mean, I still like I still can't get enough of Logan Nine Fingers and Glockta and Lord Baez and the huge plot twists and especially how the series is bookended. It starts where it ends, as if Logan Nine Fingers is just trapped in this endless cycle of a story, which I thought was really cool. And but yeah, so do you like the First Law trilogy more or less than Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones, Dusty?
It's hard to say because I've only went through Game of Thrones once, and it's not like finished.
No.
Like, I know Abercrombie still has more stuff in the First Law universe, but the second trilogy is like years removed from the first, so it's
hmm
not quite the same. So it's hard for me to say. I say currently, um, hmm, yeah, I'd have to say that I think Abercrombie is just a bit more entertaining as a writer. Um, just just like his little jokes and the visceralness of his combat. And it's weird because his combat is
Yeah.
just like nuts. Like, lots of people
Yeah, it's
making
just
weird
chaos.
sounds. It's like nobody dies
Yeah.
instantly unless their head gets cut off. Like, if you're not
Yeah,
getting your head cut
exactly.
off, it's like a slow, painful, gruesome, realistic death. Like, I remember um like the guy, one of the guys they killed, um like when they fought the Master Swordsman, he stabbed him like in the face, and he
Yeah.
was like saying incomprehensible stuff. He was still like getting up and trying to move around, but he's just like slamming into the wall because he can orientate himself. Like, it was
Yeah.
really gruesome, and what I would expect, like realistic death. Like no one just gets stabbed a couple times and then they're just like dead there. Like it takes a while for
they
people
suffer.
to die. Yeah.
Yeah. And they die in such brutal ways, like you said, someone can get like part of their face chopped off and still be trying to talk and survive until they bleed out, or there are parts where someone gets part of their skull chopped off, or they'll
There's
get a
lots
limb
of
chopped off.
it almost seems like there's never any clean beheadings in this universe. Like the only one I saw in this book
Yeah.
was when Costco was fighting somebody, and then since he was like tired, he needed to use some dirty tricks, so he took the decapitated head and threw it at the other guy's face to kind of throw him off.
Yeah.
So that's like the only time you
Yeah.
get like a clean like decapitation. Every other time it's just like, oh, you chopped like the back corner of his head like off, or split his skull open, or lots of bashings with blunt objects,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Pretty gruesome
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
People
We are talking about
handling
Lord
their viscera.
Grimdark.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, that's so brutal. It's almost like every fight scene is like the opening to Saving Private Ryan or something.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, like you get this really brutal stuff
it's
where
all
people
super
aren't
real.
dying right away. They have to kind of live with like
people get ripped
their
apart
mangled
and
bodies.
mutilated. Yeah.
And then, after suffering, they succumb to whatever horror that they had inflicted on them. But yeah,
Yep.
I'd say, Joe, I think he's just a bit more witty. Like the dialogue's quite witty, for the most
You
part.
mean George?
No, I'm saying Joe Abercrombie has a wittier dialogue.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
But I don't know. I like, it's been a while since I've gotten back into Ice and Fire. But yeah, I have to say I might change my mind if I started rereading like Ice and Fire again, or reading like the Targaryen saga stuff that I haven't gotten into yet. But I'll get back over there. I have to get back into that universe, considering like that TV show's coming out and everything.
I can see that. I mean, yeah, I guess especially in terms of the dialogue, in terms of all of the, royals like Cersei who are cloaking all of their true intentions and pretending to be a righteous person, and they have more proper like monarchy, but aristocrat language about the way that they talk. That could be one aspect of the more epic fantasy type of grimdark that Game of Thrones is in comparison to First Law.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I like too about Joe Abercrombie's work is he does like emphasize the clashing of cultures quite a bit in his work. So you get like the Northmen versus, and here it's basically Shivers kind of adjusting his North mentalities and dealing with these Styrians, which it's like it must be very difficult because there's like no loyalty there. Whereas in the North, he had like camaraderie amongst his peers. As there's this point in the book where he's not feeling any companionship or camaraderie, and he goes up to Friendly and he attempts to have a conversation with him, but Friendly is pretty taciturn. He doesn't speak in many sentences, so he just goes on and
his name
starts
is so
about,
ironic. That's one thing that's so cool about his character. His name is so ironic. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say Friendly is like unfriendly. Like he doesn't just like say piss off or anything. but he's definitely not
Yeah.
like, hey, let's get to know each other type of guy.
Yeah, he's
I know
kind of
he
more
does.
socially awkward.
Yeah, he has admiration for Sajam. Like he really did like Sajam. But what I was saying, like he goes and he seeks companionship with Friendly, and his way is basically talking about all the different battles that he's been in, because that's kind of how Northmen talk to each other. They talk about their battles and how they got their name, and he's kind of lacking that companionship in Styria. And it seems like all of it, he throws all his cards in with Monza as his companion because they have similar backgrounds. Like they're both warriors, and I'm pretty sure, like behind the scenes, they can talk about like the different battles that they've been in and stuff like that. That's kind of the closest he has to a Northman in that group.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, were there any other of your favorite parts of the book, or just comparisons you thought of maybe in general in comparison to other Grimdark, or comparisons between Best Served Cold and the First Law trilogy? No?
Yeah, the only, like I said, that one bank scene is genius.
That's that's a cool kind of heist part.
Yeah, I was like really looking forward to reading that scene again because of how much I enjoyed it previously. But that was like my favorite like revenge plot because it was very intricate, super funny, like Morbier trying to deal with assassinating a guy and all of his little plots getting struck down. But yeah, I really liked that, and and if I'm trying to compare it to the like wider trilogy, this is kind of just telling quite a narrow story. We don't see the world building that we saw in the previous trilogy, where we're getting into like the lore aspect of it. I'm not sure, as we do get a slice of Styrian culture.
We do,
but like we know nothing about what are their deities. Like we do see that it's a bunch of warring states, and it's not very stable compared to like the Union or something like that. But it was hard to gauge. It almost seemed like the Styrians are very, I don't know, kind of reminds me more of the world of Gentlemen Bastards than it does to like the first book of, or the trilogy. Like I get a
That's
Gentleman
interesting.
Bastards
Yeah,
feel
I kind of
more.
Especially when they're getting the crew together, and when they do that bank heist to poison the books, especially those parts of the books reminded me of that atmosphere too.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, because I think I read Gentleman Bastards first before this book. So I was like, oh yeah, this is familiar territory to me. But to be honest,
I read this
think
the first time I read Best Served Cold was before I read Gentlemen Bastards, but now I read that before my reread of this.
yeah, but I actually like the first book of Gentlemen Bastards better than this one.
Yeah, me
which
too.
is like blasphemy. But I thought,
oh really?
Well, you said this is like one of your favorites, right? But I like Gentleman. I think if I were going to compare the first Gentleman Bastards book to Best Served Cold, I would say, yeah, the first book of Gentleman Bastards is pretty goddamn good. It's just, and it's funny too, because that first Gentleman Bastard book is like way better than the other two that came out after that.
I agree. I agree. The first Gentleman Bastards book is definitely my favorite, and I like book 2, but not as much as book 1. And I was pretty disappointed by book 3, to be honest.
Yeah, book 3 was like, yeah, what's going on? It's like the author's losing their spunk or something, which is probably, it's been years. There's supposed to be a 4th book. I don't know when that's coming out.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Have you read Gentleman Bastards, Tristram?
I have not, but I've heard it recommended.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
definitely. Yeah, Liza Locklemore. It's definitely worth reading.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I thought it
guys,
was funny.
I've got to call it for me tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know it's super late for you. Thanks guys. This is it's always fun nerding out about fantasy with you guys, and yeah, next time let's get into First Law Era 2 and start off with Alloy of Law and get into some fantasy western, which is cool because you and I have been talking about.
He does mean
what did I say? Yeah, Mistborn.
It's called Alloy of Law, so you called it First Law Era 2.
Yeah, Alloy of Law. Sorry, Mistborn Era 2. Yeah, so we'll get into some fantasy western. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Look forward to that. I'll check out Dusty's channel tomorrow, Woke Centrist. We're going to talk about that movie Joker, the one from 2019 with Joaquin Phoenix, which is another awesome, tragically grim, dark, but still awesome movie, similar to Best Served Cold in that way. And check out future videos and podcasts I've got coming up. I might actually, before I talk with you, Dusty, tomorrow, I might finally be doing that chat I've been going to do with Ben Burgess, the philosopher and political commentator and author who I've talked with before. And yeah, subscribe to the channel, click that like button, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Check out my Patreon page. Link is in the description as always. Even $1 a month is greatly appreciated. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read Best Served Cold. You don't even necessarily have to have read the First Law trilogy to get into it, because it is a great standalone book that way. And check out First Law and Game of Thrones and Gentleman Bastards as well. And anything else you guys want to say before we end it there?
It's all good.
Thanks. All right. It's all good.
All right. Thanks, guys. All right. Thanks, guys. And thanks again, everyone. And adios until next time.